Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
I've been in jail a lot. That was my haven of rest. I was afraid of jail, and I'm just so thankful that I went, because I didn't go to jail to get things. I went to jail to find me.
My name is Booker Small, and I'm here with
Ida Paulette Small Speller, and I am Sarah Small, second oldest child, oldest daughter, and this is her grandson, Booker. We're here today to discuss the Civil Rights Movement of 1963 and on in Williamston, North Carolina.
So I'd like to start off by having you tell us what a freedom fighter is.
A freedom fighter is a person or persons that are participating in the civil rights movement, and they're fighting for justices and freedom. They normally consistently come to meetings, they march. When we march, we have sit-ins, we have boycotts, we do things that would bring freedom to, at the time we were called Negroes.
And you were a freedom fighter?
Yes, I was a freedom fighter.
Now, how did you become a freedom fighter?
Well, actually, I was sort of tricked into it by Mother. Jimmy and I were outside playing one day, and she called us in, and she was all excited about this big meeting that was coming up. And at this meeting, we were going to be marching. And for us, marching was like a parade, or the Elks are having their march or something like that, big bands. So we got excited, too. Then we agreed that we would go because we wanted to go see what it was all about. And the next day, we went down to Reverend Carter's church. When we got there, it was about 7 to 10 young people that were there, along with 2 men that we didn't know. We knew Reverend Carter, but the other 2 we didn't know. And before it was over, we found out it was Mr. Golden Frinks, who turned out to be our field secretary leader, and Reverend Lagarde, who became our minister of music during that time.
How old were you? Can I ask that?
Sure. I was 13. It was 1963.
Okay.
I was 13 years old.
And this was in North Carolina?
This was in Williamston, North
Williamston,
Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay.
Yes.
And so, Jimmy, you're talking about Uncle Jimmy.
Yes.
How old was he?
Oh, let me see. If I was 13, then he was 10.
Okay. And so she asked you, does that mean that everybody was involved?
Well, mainly Jimmy, Mama Jimmy, and I.
Okay.
And if she couldn't get a babysitter, because Kat was the baby at the time.
My mother, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your mother, right. She would take her along, but she didn't march. She just would go to meetings. There were people there that watched their children when we went out to do the different demonstrations. I'll interchange demonstration and marches, but they're both the same.
Okay. So was Grandma Sarah Small?
Mm-hmm.
She was recruiting people and got you into it.
What initially had happened was she had gone to a meeting prior to this, and apparently she met Golden Frinks along with Reverend Carter, and they planned it, but she wasn't intending initially to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
But she knew they wanted a lot of young people, so she knew she had 2 children that she could contribute to the, if you will, to the movement.
So she was a recruiter.
In a sense,
Okay.
she recruited us initially.
What,
Because our first march, we were taking the march. She wasn't a part of it, and when we were marching, down the middle of Sycamore Street, and she happened to have been sitting in a house off of Sycamore Street, but could view the street with her friend Miss Waddell Brown. And when she looked and saw that there were 3 men leading us, and 2 of them weren't even from Williamston, she said, I can't let, no, not outsiders, but people that are not from Williamston lead our children.
right.
So from that day forward, she got out and led us.
Okay.
Mhm.
What was Granddad?
Granddad at the time was teaching. He taught at the E.J. Hayes School. And one of the things that teachers and people that were fully employed were afraid to get involved in the civil rights movement for the mere reason they may lose their jobs. Although it didn't do my father any good, because even though he wasn't actively in it, his wife was, so the following year he didn't get his contract renewed.
Oh.
So that way he lost his job and he had to go to New York to find a teaching position.
So he wasn't there for the demonstration?
Yes, he was there, but at that time he was already contracted.
Okay.
So he was there throughout 63, 64. So the fall of 64, his contract didn't get renewed.
Okay.
We started in July of 63.
Right.
So his contract was signed probably in May of 63.
Did Grandma have any previous civil rights experience, or it was just that one day she decided she was going to be a leader?
Well, see, she was a pianist for 5 different churches in the area. And they were young people that she played for as well as the older people. So, and when you say experience, it was experience coming out of her Christian background and what she did as using her talents. She did Bible school during the summer with different young people. And she did the pianos, playing the piano for the different churches and their young people. But as far as civil rights, no, she hadn't gotten to that level yet.
Okay. But she was like involved with the community.
Yeah, because she sold insurance for my Uncle JD. She sold life insurance, if you will. I call it death insurance because you can't collect unless you die. But it was life insurance, so she knew a lot of people. And a lot of people had a lot of children.
She was at different places. That was a Green Memorial. Was that a church?
Yes. As a matter of fact, as we outgrew the tent, because people were stuck, the more they heard about it, the more the young people came. She was playing at Green Memorial for the junior choir. And one Saturday, after she finished the rehearsals, she went to my father-in-law, who wasn't my father-in-law at the time. His name was William Dorsey Speller, and asked him.
Brother Dorsey.
Yes.
Okay.
He was the head deacon of the church, and she asked him, did he think it would be possible that they could hold the movement there? Now, prior to asking him, she had asked other churches, and they firmly denied her because they saw the bombings and the burnings of the different churches throughout the South, and they weren't about to have enough faith to do that.
Brother Dorsey didn't care? Or?
No, Brother Dorsey had the faith. He went to the people of the church and told them that they will house the civil rights movement, in other words. I mean, I don't think he got any opposition. So that was when we first started down. It was about 6 weeks after the movement actually started.
What was he? Did he have a job outside of being a deacon?
Yes, he had a job. I think he was working at the fertilizer plant at one point, and he was one of the first to get fired because of the civil rights movement. Although he didn't march, but he was a heavy supporter. He and his wife.
So his grandma, brother Dulcie, were there others like, as brave or as daring?
Oh yeah, it was Miss Hattie, Mary Louise Mobley, Ella Mae Almond. You talking older people or just people in general?
Just people in general.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing the older people.
Yeah, that had more to lose than the young people.
Right. Okay.
Right. So, well, Ella Mae Almond owned her own store, so she was her own benefactor.
Okay. And her customers were
us, black people.
Right.
So she didn't have anything to worry about as far as being boycotted or stuff of that nature. And then Mary Mobley, she had something to lose because she worked for one of the potential places that we were going to picket and sing serenade, if you will.
Right. Well, I mean, this is good because all these names and I have their faces and names in my head, and I don't know how they connect. And now you're telling me, I'm like, oh.
And of course, Cousin Francis King was one of them as well. I don't want to miss anybody. That was John Small, my brother. John Small.
He was an adult though, was he?
Yes, John was about 22.
He was about 22. Okay. He was one of the younger.
Yeah, he was a youth leader.
Okay. All right.
And then there was William Nelson Williams. There was Vanna Hodges. Older people. Levester Harris. That was basically it in the initial.
So Uncle John was one of the youth leaders.
Yes.
Can you tell us the difference? I mean, did they have different functions, or was it just their age that made them?
Well, actually, we voted for our youth leaders when Mr. Franks decided he wanted to organize the civil rights movement, and he said we needed a president. I'm not sure about the vice president. I cannot remember a vice president, but the president was Mama. The treasurer was Levester Harris. The secretary was Hattie Vanilla Speller. The assistant secretary, actually, Hattie was the assistant secretary, and Brenda Williams was the secretary. But we had an array of youth leaders. Robert Purvis, John Small, Annette Lanier, Alma Freeman, Jackie Bond, that crew.
Was their function different, or?
Yes, they were more like in front. They were the leaders. They were the adults. Mr.
Who were in the back?
Nope. Mr. Franks and Mama led.
Okay.
And behind them would be the youth leaders. And we marched by twos. So you could say, and right behind them would be, say, Vanna Hodges and John Small and Jackie Bonds and Annette Lanier, Alma Freeman and Robert Purvis. And then the rest of us fell in the back. And they were youth leaders because they led us. We were behind them in the marches, and they would call certain calls, like if we're going to go and boycott someplace or picket, they would strategize with the older leaders, and then when we come to meet, then we would be informed. A lot of times we got informed through a song. And one of the times, like if we were going to boycott school, they'd get up and start singing, "No school bong, tomorrow bong, no school bong, tomorrow, no school," like that. And the message got through that we weren't going to go to school the following day because we were boycotted.
Wow. Was there a warning or there wouldn't be a warning? People would just start singing and everybody would get it?
At first it was a warning, but then throughout time everybody got it. We knew what was coming up.
Yeah.
And when we knew we were going to jail, we'd sing, "I'll go to jail for my freedom. I'll go to jail for my freedom. I'll go to jail for my freedom, freedom, freedom. So it was times that we knew that we were going to go or planned to go.
What was freedom? What in your mind?
Well, initially, Mama always talked about equal rights. I don't know when integration slipped in there, but we were getting like the old books from the white school. We weren't getting our share of what the federal government was sending in for the public school system. And what they did was just give us pass downs. We weren't able to go and sit in certain places and eat. We weren't able to go to the bottom of the movie. We had to always go up to the balcony, and they had a ground level part for the white people. So those things we were calling the freedom to do it if we wanted to, the freedom to go and sit in this establishment, the freedom to, if I choose not to sit on the right side of the courthouse but the left side, it was okay. But even the courthouse was segregated. The sinks were segregated, the drinking fountains were segregated, the toilets were segregated, and I was a very rebellious person because I was wondering, did their water taste different from ours? So I would go over and try it out, but I didn't get in trouble or anything.
Did anybody just, think like you do? And
Probably. I don't think I was a loner on this.
Well, did anybody actually try to say, well, I'm going to see what happens and drink from this water fountain, or was that just something that...
I'm pretty sure they did. I didn't see anybody. I know I did. I even went to the white ladies' room. But the lady that was in there thought I was the daughter of the custodian that cleaned the bathroom. So for her, it was no big deal. So I don't know.
So was there any consequence for, not going where you're supposed to go? Or...
Well, later when we were trying to go into, say, the Griffin Quick Lunch, which was one of the second places we went to try to integrate. And at that time, it was about 7 or 8 freedom fighters that went in. And we were already lined up. So as one group was arrested, the next group would go in. And this particular day, they went in and sat down. But they weren't offered any service. Matter of fact, they were being threatened for just coming in there, sitting down. But the owner told them, don't touch him, according to John Small, who was one of the first ones to go in there at that time, said, don't hit them with the ketchup bottles and the hot sauce bottles. That's what they want you to do. So they called the police instead. Well, as the police was racking out one group, another group would go in. They take out their group, and they were piling us in the cars like sardines. So after we got out, then the other proprietors who we could have gone and sat in with started locking their doors when they saw us, including Griffin Quick Lunch. We never got back in there either. But the very first place we went was Watts Theater. And a young lady by the name of Brenda Williams, who was our secretary, was the first one to the window to purchase a ticket. And of course, the guy wouldn't allow her to purchase the ticket. So then she has to speak to his manager. We were all there in line. In the event she got a ticket, we were all going to purchase. But we were told if they didn't sell us tickets, sit where we stood. And that was our first sit-in, was we blocked the entrance of the theater. So we couldn't go in and nobody else could either. And of course we were arrested for that. But all arrests did not result in jail time. Initially. But what started the jail time was the town created an ordinance where we couldn't march without a permit. See, prior to that, we were able to march. But you could only gather so many together and march or go through town.
Did you know these people, or were they just doing it out of the goodness of their
Well,
heart?
Mrs. Peel owned a local store right on the corner of the street that we lived on. So she was very familiar with the black community because they were the ones that purchased from her. They patronized her. Jerry Beach was just a kind guy. Seemed like to me.
Mm-hmm.
I always liked Jerry. He wasn't harsh. He didn't. I never seen him hit at us or chase us with the billy clubs as I saw with others.
Right. I think you made mention to Golden Franks.
Yes,
Before?
Golden Franks, who was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference field secretary for Eastern North Carolina.
Okay.
And
that was the organization that Martin Luther King was
absolutely. Martin Luther King headed the SCLC.
Okay.
And eventually Mama got on as SCLC representative as Golden's assistant.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, okay. So she worked directly with him?
Directly with him, yeah.
And he was director?
Yes, yes. Mr. Franks was a very cunning man. You remember earlier we were talking about chess and checkers?
Right.
He was a chess player.
Okay.
And he was playing chess with a bunch of checker players.
Okay.
And so he not only...
Who were the checker players?
The white people, the Caucasians. And he saw what they didn't see. He didn't just plan for today. He made an impact for a long time. Like, one time he decided that this person would lead or be in front because of special reasons he had, or if this person had economic value, he made sure that they were happy so that, they could keep supporting us to that, without calling names, but yeah.
What did he do? What was his like?
He was more like he strategized. He kept us on course. He
I guess
taught us about nonviolence.
I know he was a leader in the Southern
Christian
leadership, right? Was that his full-time job, or
that was his full-time job? He got paid.
Okay.
He was on the payroll.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Was he from Williamston?
No, he was from Edenton, North Carolina,
Okay.
which was about 30-some miles from Williamston.
Right.
So I don't know why or who sent for him, but he ended in Williamston. I never did get the origin of that exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that the NAACP had been meeting over garbage pickup at the Cornerstone Church in Williamston. And I think that's where he came to listen in on it. Somebody must have informed him about it. How
did Grandma come to work with him?
Well, remember I told you about the first march?
Yeah.
And then from then, after she got up front and led with him, then she was voted to be the president. And so they had to work hand in glove, because without the cooperation of the people, it was no need of him being there. And she knew the people.
So she was the actual, I guess, hometown person, and he was the, I don't want to say outsider. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He was an outsider. He wasn't a Williamstonian, so yeah.
So, like, would they talk? What would they talk about? How was this?
Strategizing. Should we march? Should we go to jail? What places to go next? Like, there was a place called the Shamrock that served food, but it wouldn't allow black people to come in and sit down and eat. There was a motel called the Breezewood. They wouldn't allow black people to come in and spend the night. Only place I remember that had a hotel for colors was in Windsor, North Carolina. And so there was the Breezewood, there was the Shamrock for eating, there was the Griffin Quick Lunch, there was the R&C. R&C would pass our food through a window. They sell to us, but they wouldn't allow us to come in. And
at the same price?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, maybe more. I'm pretty sure it was about at the same price. So that's what we decide on, what days we'd go, what we would do, where we would picket. They decided when we would boycott downtown Williamston to make it hurt the proprietors. So those were the things they talked about. And then, of course, he had to get a lot of things cleared through Dr. King.
Okay, so everything was funneled through him. Is that where they came up with the strategies from? Did they, it was like a think tank for?
Oh yeah, it was well. Theirs was more of a think tank. Remember, Mama was a Christian, and she did a whole lot of praying, asking for guidance.
Okay.
So as she got answers revealed to her, she would share them with the rest of the group, like Mr. Franks, Mrs. Mobley, Francis King, and perhaps a few of the youth leaders that happened to be there. And one time the Lord told her to go in front of the S&V, and we just stand there and sing. Well, little known to us that he had to show us how he was protecting us. And we're standing out there just singing and singing, and if you miss me from my table at home, you can't find me nowhere. Just come on over to the Shamrock, and I'll be eating over there. And they sent a mosquito truck by, and they blew the mosquito dust on us, they thought. And miraculously, a light wind came and lifted it right over our heads. No one coughed, no one missed a beat, and we kept on singing praises. We were thanking God for, I shall not be moved, I shall not be moved. Just like a tree planted by the water, I shall not be moved. And then we'd go back down the hill, and maybe the next night. But like I told you, now these proprietors by then got hip from what we did in quick lunch. So when they see us coming, or someone tell them that we were going to come, they lock up the doors. When we got to Shamrock this particular night, this was prior to Mrs. Mobley being a part of the freedom movement, she was there working as a cook. And when she saw the proprietor or the boss or the manager, whoever, lock that door, she took her apron off. And she was like, if my people ain't good enough to come in here to eat, then I'm not good enough to cook. And she quit her job right there on the spot and joined us.
Wow. How'd she eat?
Beg your pardon?
How did she eat?
What do you mean, how did she eat?
Well, she quit her job?
She had a husband.
Oh, okay.
God provided.
Yeah.
God provided.
Okay. Is there another interesting point in all of this that you'd like to share? I guess I'm wondering if there's another story here.
Oh yeah, there are lots of stories. I don't know, which one do I want to get to first? I probably want to talk about the standoff between the law enforcement and the civil rights marchers. Green Memorial was located down the hill.
Okay.
And
the church.
The church.
Okay.
So in order for us to get to City Hall or any other place, we'd have to come up steps and go up the hill to do our demonstrations. But this time they had made up their mind they weren't going to let us pass the steps. They're law enforcement. So they blocked us from coming in. And that night, everybody just sat down. And so if you're not going to let us by, we're not going back to the church.
I'm sorry, how did they block you?
They stood across
They just stood. Okay. So these were police officers?
Law enforcement, because remember, it wasn't only police, it was sheriffs as well.
Oh.
So the sheriff's office was involved as well.
Huh.
So they stood across and wouldn't allow us to go by. And we sat down, and they stood. So Mama, Sarah Small, and the sheriff came to a compromise, which needs to be something that can be done right there in the White House, up there on the hill now. And the compromise was, if you leave, we'll leave. In other words, he'd take his group and leave, and she'll take her group and leave. And it had to be simultaneously. It couldn't be, well, we got one over on you type thing. Now, there were times it wasn't so peaceful. They have ran us back down the hill with the billy clubs hitting at us and everything. One thing I remember so vividly in my mind, there was this fellow named Joe Carney Brown. And the harder they hit him to make him run, the slower he walked. I admired that because it was like, I'm not going to allow, you might can take away physical, but you cannot manage my mind. And he walked slowly, and they beat him pretty bad in his back. They just beat him and beat him. And I witnessed that with my eyes. That to me made me look at him as a different type of person. I didn't know he had that kind of strength in him to do that. Because everybody was running, including guys, It wasn't like all the guys were tough, they were running too. So that was one of the things that really impressed me and really stood out in my mind.
What was his name again?
Joe Carney Brown.
Joe Carney Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And then another thing that stands out that I remember is the standoff we had at the schoolyard. We were going to march from the school down to City Hall. And somehow the law enforcement found out about it. And there was a railroad track that went across the main street. So, and to block us from marching, they sent the train down the track and then it stopped. So we couldn't get by. Other leaders were going to march anyway if they had to go around the train. So at this time they had cattle prods and billy clubs. And a couple of people got cattle prodded that day. My brother John was telling me that they took 2 cattle prods and put them in one of our youth leaders' abdominals, her stomach, and her name was Jackie Barnes. And he said those cattle prods were so powerful that they knocked her off her feet. And he cattle prod Reverend Carter, remember me telling you about him, and another lady. So John runs back, according to him, to Jackie's father's store. Jackie's father owned a corner store, local store there, right beside the school, just across the street, and told him what had happened. And this just enraged her father. He was telling us, drink the sodas and throw the bottles. And so then we were no longer being in the nonviolent mood, what we had been taught all these months. Now we're getting violent because we're giving them what they're giving us, fighting back. And that's another miracle. Because we were fighting back, that was police brutality reversed. And they could have easily shot us, beat us down, or done a lot of things that God wouldn't allow. But what they did was they sent for the fire truck to hose us. And when the fire truck came, hooked up the hose to the hydrant, the water trickled out. It wasn't that big, powerful force they was expecting. Again, that was the Lord. I believe God was not intending for nobody to lose their lives in that particular movement. And another thing we did, a lot of people march today, but what we did, we not only marched, but when we got to City Hall, we got on our knees and we prayed. One night, I remember we were coming up the hill, and the white people were standing on the sides just jeering. And I heard one lady say to her daddy, "Dad, kill him. Go get your gun and kill him." He said, golly, I ain't gonna kill no nigger and go to jail. So I was like, whoa, this is rough. Some people said they saw guns. I didn't see any. We got to the City Hall. We got on our knees and started praying. And the power of the Holy Spirit came to that same lady that told her daddy to get that gun, had her hands raised and praising God. Hallelujah. And that was so funny to me because he is no respecter of persons. And even though she wanted to be a Christian and hate black people, God wanted her to know he loved us too. And that his power would fall on us as well.
So at the beginning she told her father to kill him, and at the end she was
praising God
with you,
No, she wasn't a part, but see what they did once we got past them, then they followed us to City Hall. Mm-hmm. Wanted to continue the jeering. Mm-hmm. And I tell you something else, I never saw her out there again. Not after that night. That was a beautiful night. That was a wonderful night. Very uplifting. I can't remember who prayed, but he prayed till the power of the Lord came down. Yes, indeed.
Mm. Um, did you speak with white people on a regular basis? Did you have like contact with them? What was?
Only bill collectors, or if you were purchasing something. But no, I don't. I didn't have any white friends.
But you mentioned there were some people who helped you out
They came from the north.
who were white.
They were white.
Okay. What about the white community in Williamston?
No, if no, there were no help as far as the white community was concerned on an outward basis. Now, if it was, I didn't know anything about it.
So there was zero support.
Right. When you say support, like coming out, marching with us and coming to the meetings and stuff of that nature. But I don't think that would have been a good idea at that point because everybody became, it was like suspect. All of a sudden you
Can't trust.
want to be, so.
Mm.
But, yeah.
Was the Ku Klux Klan there?
Not always in robes. Not always in robes because remember the Ku Klux Klan was your average businessman. Could be. Let me say your average businessman, your law enforcement, your judge, your prosecutor. So you really didn't know. But I do know one night they came to the house and were getting ready to put up a cross with my memory. Now Janice Mobley remembers them burning the cross.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that. But I know they were getting ready to put up the cross. And when they came, they were all hooded and dressed. And Mama turned on the lights. So one of the ministers, white ministers from up here, whose name was Harvey, what was his name? He was Harvey Cox. He says, Sarah, if you turn on the lights, they can see us. She said, yeah, and if I turn on the lights, I can see them. So she went outside and she said, hello, Halloween's over. She was just jeering at them, and they left. And I know one night they shot in the house. They shot through where we assumed it was them. Shot through a picture window not long after Frida was born. Because Mama was 6 weeks pregnant when she headed the movement.
With whom?
Frida.
Okay.
Remember, Kat was the baby.
All right.
Yeah.
You were staying at Miss Mobley, you and everybody. How many people were staying there?
In what house?
The house that the Klan came to, and
Oh, that was our private residential home.
uh-huh.
That was where my mother, my father, my sisters and brothers lived, and I.
So Miss Mobley was just.
Miss Mobley wasn't there. I was saying according to Janice Mobley, who said she remembered the cross being burned.
Right. She was there.
Or passed by or heard about it or whatever. I'm not sure.
Okay.
She may have been told it was. I don't know exactly how.
Oh.
But I told these people, I said, I'm going to quote what you tell me, but I'm not going to own it because I don't know. If I don't know, I'm going to say I don't know.
Right.
But if you know, I'm willing to share it.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know how she knows. She could have ridden by. I don't know. I should have asked her.
All right. How many times did the KKK come to?
Well, once we know for sure. But second time when the house was shot into, that was more of a guesstimation, or we think it was Klan.
Okay.
And at the time, my father and Frida, the baby, were at the house inside. We were down to the church meeting.
Were there any other groups like to do things like that, or?
Yeah, they probably did, but KKK had the brand name because they done things in the past that frightened black people back into submission. This is what makes me know that this was God inspired, because all they had to do was pluck off a leader, just get them by themselves, because their court system wasn't going to convict them, their jury wasn't going to convict them, and take them alone. Hang them by the tree, do them like they did Emmett Till or Joe Cross or anybody else. And That would have been that, because that would have put fear in people. Say, oh wow, I might be next. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You weren't scared already?
I didn't have sense enough to be scared. I was young. I thought, for me, it was almost like a game. It was something to do. Do you know how boring Williamston was?
No.
Williamston was boring. We didn't have a swimming pool for black people. There was no swimming pool. We couldn't go to the bowling alley. The bowling alley closed down because they didn't allow the black people to come in. The swimming pool was shut down and made into a parking lot to keep black people out. Mm-hmm. We had nothing. The nearest water to us was 22 miles away. We went to a beach called Little Washington Beach. And we'd get on the back of this man named Dave Rogers' truck and ride to the beach. Pay him $25 to go put, But many of us couldn't swim. We weren't privy to that kind of stuff. That's just how, boring it was. It was a sad place to be. And most people went away for the summer. They went to Stamford, Connecticut. They went to New York. And later on, after the ministers from Massachusetts came, we started coming to Massachusetts. But it was nothing to do. So for me, that was just, out every night. Mr. Franks had a tab running at this place called Mary's Cafe. We could go down there and get a hamburger, cheeseburger, french fries, soda, put it on Mr. Franks' tab.
I remember 12th Baptist, there was like, the youth choir or BYF or some stuff like that to do at the church. Did you have church functions or?
No, we had Christian endeavors, and that was once a year. Mm-hmm. And we had vacation Bible school, which was a week, mm-hmm. out of the summer, unless you went around to different churches. And it wasn't all day. It was from 9 to 12. Mm-hmm. So no, it was, and we had a playground, but then it was too hot to go out there and just ride the swings and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we really didn't have anything for us. I remember in July, John was telling me that a group of guys had gotten arrested and were put in jail. And he said it was about 52 of them in an 8-man cell. Bill Mobley was telling me this similar. And he said they were so stacked on each other. It was like they could barely move. And to add insult to injury, they turned the heat on in the cell. This is July. And John said he could hear the sizzling coming from the radiator. Psst, psst, psst. And they were about to pass out. Now, Bill seems to think that they stuffed the sink and turned on the water so that they could cool off. John seems to remember that they were sweating so hard the water was coming off. But at any rate, they were dehydrating. They were sweating. They were doing anything to cool off. Bill said that the water overflowed and went down into the women's cell is what got the attention of the jailer. And he came up to check it out and saw that they were almost out. So he put up the window. And John said the window, when he put that window up, it must have been 90 degrees out there. But it felt like air conditioning just come streaming through.
Mm-hmm. Uncle John.
Mm-hmm. Uncle John.
So stuff like this happened, and did anyone ever think, okay, well, I don't want to do this anymore, or?
Probably. We did it for 32 nights consecutively.
Okay.
But we didn't go to jail all 32 times.
Right.
We marched, we sung, we prayed, we were getting in preparation.
Would it work like there'd be a season for it, and then you'd take a break, or is just?
Nope, it was up to the leaders what we were going to do, how we were going to execute it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we picketed, made signs. The days that we boycotted the schools, we made signs and would picket various stores, telling people to boycott, don't buy. And then we take turns doing that, and then we go back down to the church. And Miss Hattie Speller, who was DePriest's mother, she prepared meals along with other ladies. She prepared meals for us so that we wouldn't have to go home to have dinner, but we could eat there. And from there, we got support.
How long did Grandma and Golden Frinks work together? Do you remember?
They worked together well into after she moved up here.
Okay.
Because he came up here and started a movement with ex-offenders. And the acronym was CARCAP. I just don't remember what it was. But do you remember John McGrath in that group from South Boston?
I don't.
He worked with them. He even made the news up here. Mr. Freaks was a mess. He used to say that Williamston was a mess because the call letters for the radio station there was WIAM. And he said, oh, that's mean Williamston is a mess. And he was too. Yeah, so he came up here and he stayed for about 6 months. And got a movement started up this way.
Okay.
Yep.
Who's Uncle Roy?
Uncle Roy was our jailer. Oh, he was the nicest guy. The ladies from down the hill would fix us great meals. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, you name it. And he'd bring it to us and we'd eat it. And the sheriff caught wind of it and said, no, they cannot eat no more outside food. They have to eat the food that the jail provided. And Uncle Roy felt so bad for us because his wife prepared the food and he knew her food was not going to be half as good as what we were getting. But the reason why we called him Uncle Roy was it's sort of like a mimic. We turned it around because the white people would always call our people auntie and uncle. So then we turned around and started calling him Uncle Roy. But he was a very kind person. He was thin in stature. I can't think of anybody, no TV character right off there he would remind you of, but he was a pretty nice, decent guy.
And his wife? Did you know her?
I think she was overweight. It seemed like I remember seeing her through the jailhouse window because we could see. We had a view of who was coming up the hill, who was going down the hill. So I think I saw her one day bringing over the meals, but I'm not sure it was her.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, what do you think the impact of all of that was? Like, how do you remember Williamston when you left it?
One of the things was because they knew us, a lot of they being the white people.
Mm-hmm.
Like my great-grandfather probably did business with the mayor's great-grandfather at some point. So they knew us and really felt kindly toward us in a way until before the Civil Rights Bill was passed. They had called to sit down and talk to find out exactly what was it we wanted. Mm-hmm. And that was before the Civil Rights Bill had passed because we were dipping into the economy. That was another thing I wanted to say. Let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
The reason why they turned that heat on in the jail was because Williamston had a budget and they had not budgeted in all these people coming to jail, for one thing. So they figured that would be a great deterrent. Secondly, we were a tobacco economy. Our economy hinged on tobacco. So we weren't rich per se as far as economics went.
Do you know the company or companies who were part of that industry?
No, all I know is they took the tobacco up to Raleigh,
okay,
and sold it off.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons why John believes that the heat was on. Mm-hmm. Then they did a lot of prankster stuff. Like Bill was telling me there was some guys that would come with a hookup or a device on their truck and scratch all the people's cars that were in the movement with it. And then John was saying this other guy named Zeb Robinson, he had a device that when he backed up in your car, he'd puncture your radiator. He would puncture your radiator. But cars weren't as prevalent then as it was then. Now, everybody didn't have a car. That was why when we boycotted the Williamston downtownship, we started the boycott prior to school opening. And people needed to buy their children's school clothes. So we had to go to surrounding towns to shop. And we didn't have the bus system transportation like that. So they would carpool and take people shopping just to keep them from buying downtown, which really hurt the economy too, as well.
I'd like to get back to what you were saying about the white people and us, the freedom fighters, or just everybody in Williamston?
No, everybody. What do you mean?
Well, you said before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you wanted to sit down and speak about what.
Oh, with the leaders
right.
of the Civil Rights Movement. Yeah. All the leaders minus Golden Frinks. They didn't consider him. They didn't acknowledge him because he was an outsider.
Okay.
But the leaders, which were Mary Mobley, Sarah Small, Francis King, Vanna Hodges, John, that group.
Okay. Is that part of, I don't know.
But no, everybody black wasn't a part, in North Carolina wasn't a part of the movement.
When you say outsiders, is there a strong feeling of a community that even, that black people were a part of, or how do you mean? Well, they wanted to sit down with us.
With
and
the
people from Williamston, the black people from Williamston,
the leaders of the movement.
The leaders of the movement. Okay. And did you get there? Did you sit down and did you talk?
Oh yeah. They were able to talk to them and come to some conclusions as to what we wanted and how we were willing to stop the boycotting and the different things. And they even consented to us going to integrate the school.
Were you at any of the meetings?
No.
Okay.
We would get reports. They'd come back and tell us.
What would some of the reports be?
Mama used to mimic them. What y'all want? Just tell us what y'all want. And Mama said, well, we want to be able to sit down and eat like, we want to. And we want the fair share for our schools and stuff of that nature. The things that we were marching for, actuality.
And what did they say to that?
I'm sure they were agreeing to it. They understood what they had, but they couldn't make that decision without talking to the owners or the proprietors. And so there was negotiations going on. But they weren't clear on what we wanted, according to them.
So the people you were talking to, they were representatives for the higher ups?
No, actually, this was the town council.
Okay.
But you can't, if I own a store, you can't just tell me who I can let in my store and who I can't. And then they don't want to get on their bad side either, because they might pack up their industry or whatever and leave, which would make the town a little bit more poor. So they wanted to find a happy medium for everybody. The only places I remember is the only place I remember that we didn't have to boycott were the cab stands, because they were owned by the black people. I never saw a white cab. And it was the laundromat, that was never segregated. We used to wash up there all the time because we didn't have a washing machine or dryer. So Mama would always send me up there to wash. There was the Tasty Freeze. We didn't have to boycott or do it because everybody got served through the window. That was like a fast food place with ice cream and stuff of that nature. That was basically it. That, we didn't have to target those particular places. Hospitals, we knew where, if you went to the hospital, they had the white side and the black side. So if you were sick, you better go where you were going to get some help. And I had to argue about it. It was Martin General Hospital at the time. It's still Martin General, but it's no longer in the same location.
Did you feel like you made progress?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We made progress to. I think they're losing a lot. That now, what's happening is segregation, Jim Crow has come in another way.
Mm-hmm.
Account of the back to the school, and I was telling you about the cattle prodding and the train, and that was John's account as to why the riot started. Then Bill Mobley was telling me that the police had come to arrest this young man named Charles Howard, and the freedom fighters saw them taking him away. Two guys hit the police in the back with bricks, so they let him go, which made him get away free, but then it started. But the major thing was Hodges, who was one of the meanest, or if not the meanest deputy sheriff to us. Most people were targeting him when they were throwing those bottles and bricks. And his left leg got really seriously injured and bloody. So that was one of the things that I failed to include in that. Also, one night, a couple of white men had come down to set the church on fire or to bomb it. And there were people, unbeknownst to them, watching the church. And there was this gentleman who stayed beside the church, whose name was Joe Frank. He didn't shoot to harm him. What he did, he shot one of the guy's watches off his arm to let him know he was a good shot, and if necessary, he would hit him. Mm-hmm. So those were some things that I left out that I kind of wanted to get back to. And also, Dr. King sent in other civil rights workers more than Mr. Franks. He sent in Fred Shuttlesworth. He sent in James Bevel and his wife Diane Nash, William Padaway, Howard Fuller, and many others. And one of our attorneys was Kunstler from New York. Of Kunstler and Kunstler, one of the attorneys that represented O.J. Simpson, he was one of our attorneys as well. So, and...
Same guy?
Same guy.
Oh.
And another thing I'd like to touch back on that I kind of missed somewhat was we didn't have to integrate barbershops and we didn't have to integrate beauty shops. We had our own, so we were able to patronize our own people. In August of 1963, the Civil Rights Movement went to the March on Washington. Ella Mae Almond sponsored the trip for us. She chartered 2 buses. I wasn't able to go. I was very upset because I had to stay home to watch your mother. So I wasn't able to go, but I was able to go last year with Al Sharpton to Washington, D.C., so I was quite happy about that. Okay.
So is there a connection with Boston through all of this?
Oh, yeah. There were a group of ministers here in Massachusetts that wanted to help out in the South. And Paul Chapman, who was the coordinator of the ministers, contacted Dr. King and asked him where did they best need their help. And he told him to come to Williamston. That was in October of 63. That the minister was 9 ministers from Massachusetts, 1 minister from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and 1 from Rutland, Vermont. And that December of that same year, our Freedom Choir was so great, Mama was our pianist at the time, that everybody wanted to hear from us. So Boston ministers, the northern ministers brought us up here with us making us 1 stop in Philadelphia overnight, and we sung to that minister's church. We came to Boston. We stayed here about 7 or 8 days went to Martha's Vineyard, we went to Tisdale, we went to Oak Bluffs, went to Roxbury, went to Roxbury Packard Manse, where John Harmon was running it at the time prior to Mama taking it over. And we stayed out to Packard Manse in Stoughton, which was like a dormitory there with little houses all around. There they fed us and hosted us. And then from there we went to Rutland, Vermont and spent a night there. Then we came back to Williamston. I'd like to talk about the time when they had been training us on nonviolence. And one night we heard what sounded like gunshots. And guys running in, and it looked like they had blood on their faces and on their arms. But come to find out it was a prank. It was a wake-up call to us. They were shooting firecrackers. It was a fellow by the name of Oscar Bland and a few other guys shooting firecrackers and had ketchup on them. And I mean, we were frightened when we first saw that. That shook me up. That really shook me up. But all in all, you know, I mean, but Hodges was the culprit. He beat Bill Mobley, according to Bill. When he arrested him, he threw him in the van. Then when he got him into the police station, he hit him in the back of the head with the billy club and then wanted to fight him. So Bill was ready to take Hodges' gun and shoot him to his mother, which was Mary Mobley, stop him and his friend Donnell Reed from doing so. So it got messy there. One time, when they were arresting Mama during her pregnancy, they were swinging her like a rope, and then shoving her in the car. I'm sorry I cut across you.
That's okay. I'm sorry. The prank was to teach you guys a lesson?
Well, not to teach us a lesson, but to show us what could happen. And then wanted to know our reaction as to what we would do. That way, they could prepare us in the event that did happen.
Whose idea was that?
I don't know. Probably Mr. Franks. Mr. Franks was sly as a fox. Mm-hmm. You know, he was the one who said, all the black people didn't boycott downtown Williamston. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were still going in. And he was saying, if anything, I'd have you guys go over there and beat the ones that's going in, that's breaking the boycott type thing. But he was very kind-hearted. He would give you the shirt off his back. He's a very nice person, I think. And so was his wife. I thought she was wonderful to even allow him to be able to go along with him living that type of life away from her and her daughter. They had a daughter named Goldie Ann.
Yeah. So I think there's a story about you going to Florida. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. Dr. King asked us, Williamston Movement, would we come to St. Augustine, Florida, and help out with their movement. And we went down and stayed for... The first day we were there, we stayed overnight, and the next day we marched. And then we did picket sit-ins. So I went to the Fountain of Youth, is where I got arrested.
Okay.
And at this time, the Florida's laws were different from Williamston's, North Carolina's laws. So if you were 16, you still were considered underage. But they didn't care. They locked us all up in this small cell. It was a group of us young ladies, girls, but we were all minors. They took the adults and sent them to Jacksonville State Penitentiary. But they didn't stay long. They bailed the leaders out early. But the youth stayed in. And to keep us from ever doing this again, because they weren't nice to us at all. First of all, they fed us baby food throughout that whole 5-day stench. Secondly, I found out that my mother could have signed me out, but she didn't think it would be fair to the other youth until their parents got there from Williamston to sign them out. So she left me in. I was livid when I found out I could have been out of that prison, that jail, and I never. But that was a horrible, horrible time. And I never ever wanted to go to jail again. That sealed it for me. I didn't ever want to go to jail again. We did march from Edenton, North Carolina to Windsor on another, that wasn't the Williamston movement, but we were again joining and helping out other civil rights movements throughout the state, doing different things that would help them. And I forgot to say that we did have people that were able to bond us out. And Mr. Styron Bonds Sr. was one of them. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Tommy Bonds from Windsor, North Carolina. He had a lot of land that he was able to put up to get us out. So it wasn't like we had monies to bail us out, but we had people that weren't afraid and that were willing to participate in helping us with our fight. Because Mr. Bonds used to come over, Tommy Bonds, with his children and march with us and go to jail. Another incident that happened during that standoff, according to John Small, was there was this fellow, he was a big athletic guy named Blue Watson. And they were cattle prodding him, trying to make him move. And he didn't flinch. So after the cop did it a couple of times and he didn't flinch, he decided to see if it was working and tested it on himself. And John said it like to knock him out. So that was funny too, I thought. But, people used to call Mama at night, the people that didn't want to be seen or known, to give her advice on what she should or shouldn't do during the movement. And she told him, if the Lord is giving you something.
Where'd you eat? Lunch.
We had in the lunchroom, the general lunchroom. Most of their help were black that cooked the food. And they would be supportive of us, giving us a little extra. And naturally, we all hung together because it was just us. So that's what lets you know who was who. You couldn't miss who was there, who wasn't there. It wasn't a guessing thing. The same thing about the movement. We were in the Freedom Choir, so we sat facing the door. And there are people that say, oh, well, we slipped in and slipped. No such thing, because the choir would see you, and I sat on the front row. And many people today are saying, I was in the movement, I did this and I did that. I never saw you. I'm like Jesus, I never knew you. I didn't see you. You might have come 1 or 2 times, but I didn't miss not one night. So you saw who was coming in on a regular, and you saw who may have dropped in once in a while.
You're talking about the club or lunch? I'm sorry.
I'm back to the movement during our meetings, when we would meet for the civil rights movement and the marches. I'm moving around on you because there are things I keep remembering. I want to bring it in because all this history needs to be recorded.
Yes, and that's fine.
So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to flip the script on you.
No, that's okay. Okay.
But I just wanted to put that in because many people today are saying they were a part of the freedom movement when in actuality they weren't. They're saying they went to jail. They didn't. There was a process to going to jail. You got processed in, you got processed out. Nobody just came out of jail to a level where if you were in jail for something else, you got out because we got out.
So are there still records with
yes, it is.
Saying you went in at this time and went out at that time?
They have,
All right. I want to. Can we get back to lunch just a little bit?
Sure. I'm sorry. I had to get into that.
I know. For me, school lunch was a major part. I mean, it was very social, and you kind of understood who people were from like where they sat and how they spoke to each other. So did all the black children sit together?
Yes.
Did your friend, the alto, come and sit?
No, she sat with her own friends.
Did
And she was only friendly with me in chorus.
Okay.
I didn't have classes with her or anything like that.
Right.
But when she saw me, she would always wave and speak.
Now, like your education up to that point, did you feel that it was on par with what you met, or how does that?
Oh, I think that my
could you even
richest
assist?
education was when I was in the all-black school with all-black teachers who truly cared whether I succeeded or not. Prayer was prevalent. Prayer was still in school. We had to have a Bible verse every morning. We had to learn quotations. They exercised our minds. They prepared us for the world we were getting ready to go into. So yeah, definitely.
Where you at? And I heard that algebra was really hard because of the teacher,
Right.
the way he behaved. Were you at a mental state where you could sort of assess the education you were getting at the white school or
Green Wave.
Green Wave?
That was.
Oh, that was the name of the school?
Yeah, I think that was the mascot name.
Okay.
But where I was called Williamston High.
All right.
So I think I was saying Green Wave because the juniors, the junior high, grammar, elementary couldn't have been Williamston High. You know what I'm saying? The elementary school, they were separate.
Right, right.
But I always heard it called Green Wave.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
All right. And that's where you were at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Green Wave / Williamston High.
Right. So at Green Wave, what did you feel? I mean, could you even say that this isn't as good, or this is as good, or I don't understand what they're talking about, or were you angry a lot of the time? Were you scared a lot of the time, or did it come in waves, or how was?
I think it was a mixture of both.
Okay.
It depends on where I was. Now, if I was in Mrs. Farnell's home ec class, Mrs. Farnell was a very warm, nice person. She was the principal's wife. When I was in Mr. Cannon's class, he was new to the area, so he wasn't even he didn't have no dog in that fight. So he was treating us equally. But then there were certain classes you knew who you were. You know, the looks you would get. If I was bright skinned, I would have been red all the time. I feel, and to sum it up, I feel that the education may have been good for some, but it wasn't for me. I know that they stopped the valedictorian, salutatorian efforts because there was a black guy that came over named James Smith who looked like he was going to be a valedictorian, the valedictorian.
Because he was doing well.
He was doing very well, but he was smart anyway. He was smart, he was a very intelligent, smart guy.
Yeah.
He was so smart that Governor Sanford had offered to send him to West Point because he thought he was black. But when he found out he was black, he withdrew the offer.
I thought he was white.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Governor Sanford is also the governor that sent in the National Guard the night that we had to stand off, and they thought it was going to turn bloody.
What standoff?
The one that I was telling you about where the police wouldn't leave, the law enforcement wouldn't leave, and the movement wouldn't leave.
Okay.
So, but I'm bringing it in fragments because that's how I'm remembering it. One of the things when we were in Boston, they asked one of the young ladies to speak from the choir. We were really at dynamite. We were called the Freedom Choir. And the first thing she said that Boston needed to clean up their own backyard, which went over well. In other words, Boston wasn't doing no better, in her view, than Williamston. So while you down here helping us, you need to be getting your things straight.
So did you graduate from that school?
Oh, no. That year, after that year, Mama sent me up here to help John and Jean out with their children.
Okay.
And so I went to Jeremiah E. Burke High School over on.
You went to the Burke.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. On where is it? On Washington
I
Street.
don't know.
I think it's on Washington Street. It was an all-girls school at the time. So no. And thank God. They probably got better because more and more blacks started coming over. And after 1970, which I would have graduated in 68, but after 70, all the schools were fully integrated. Bill was telling me that the sheriff and his mother had a confrontation, Mary Mobley. And when he looked over, Mary Mobley had knocked Sheriff Rawls on the ground and was trying to get. I asked people, freedom fighters, ex-freedom fighters, to tell me some of the things they thought was good or they remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this one comment from Ronnie Rogers.
Okay.
And he said, my fondest memory during the time of the freedom movement took place at the EJA school campus. We had planned a demonstration after school, and as usual, someone from our camp handed the information to the police. Needless to say, the police, fire department, and white people who wanted to participate in disrupting the march were waiting on us. Although the odds were against us, because they had guns, dogs, and sticks, powerful fire hoses, we united in a common cause and refused to back down. The battle was bloody. Many were injured, but in victory there must be some pain. Through all the adversities, we remained united. I also remember the Freedom Singers Choir, headed by Mrs. Sarah Small. Great people are willing to make great sacrifices. Faye Clark Turner says, I remember when we were having a freedom meeting in the church, and some of the male freedom fighters had to stay on guard outside. Well, some of the white folks hired Sambo, which was a black guy that hung around there, to blow the church up. It didn't happen because he was scared off and he dropped his wallet. That's how they found out who it was. Teresa Smallwood Vaughn says, during the marches, I remember seeing Luther Brown handcuffed to a light pole and beaten by police, and seeing a policeman poking Jackie Bond with a cattle prod. I remember making some brown bag lunches for the ones who were going to the March on Washington, because I couldn't go. And last one, Shirley Brown Bell Craig says, my girlfriends, Melba Rose, who's passed on now, and her sister Rosa came to my house to tell me that they were demonstrating at the Griffin Quick Lunch and were going to sit in. We took up off Washington Street, and as soon as we got there, we were taken to jail. The jail was packed with a lot of high school students. Also, there was a black woman locked up for something else. Maybe we can find some info on her. My mother, Roberta Higgs Bell, lost her job at the peanut factory because someone said she was demonstrating. I remember studying the Constitution of the United States with my mother so that she would be able to vote. So, there are people that still have their memories of the Williamston civil rights.
How do you best remember Grandma? Or what do you think, what memories come to mind when you think of your mother, my grandmother?
Eugene Rivers said it best at one time. He said, Sarah Small is the baddest man in Roxbury. But yeah, people thought she was brave. She wasn't brave. She was courageous. Mm-hmm. Because she was scared, but she trusted in the Lord. She did it even while she was afraid. And the Lord, throughout the time, showed her that he could sustain her, that he could keep her, and that no weapon would prosper that's formed against her. And the more he showed her, the stronger her faith grew, till her life became no longer about justice, not only in this world, but getting people to know He who is the God of justice, so that you can live eternity without the
I don't think one set group of people should always be the ones to say what's good and what's bad. I see America like I would a bowl of soup. And in a bowl of vegetable soup, you see peas, potatoes, tomatoes, carrots. You see all kinds of vegetables. And every vegetable in the bowl, in the pot, pulls off a substance. And when it's finished, the peas come up peas, the potatoes come up potatoes, but you got a good soup. And I think the country limps because somebody's missing, and it's us. We are that untouched resource.